next year. I would like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council, January 18th, 2022 to order. Up first, Pastor Steve Ferris, would you like to lead us in invocation, please?
Lord, we just want to come to thank you today, Lord, for blessing us immensely in this nation. And Lord, again, we always want to pray for our leaders and ask you to give them wisdom. And Lord, we just thank you for your protection so many times we don't even know about. But Lord, there's many here tonight from even the council that are sick, and this COVID is a new challenge. And Lord, we just ask for your grace and mercy upon us. And Lord, give us wisdom to get through this particular time. Lord, we pray for our nation as those around the world, leaders, Lord, that they will look to you for their wisdom. And Lord, we just thank you for your grace and your mercy. In Jesus' name, amen.
Mr. Bagby, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of
Up first, agenda approval. If there's nothing that needs, if there's no recommended changes, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion?
Second.
Ayes have it, so moved. Up next is a proclamation. There's nobody here to receive this proclamation. I'm going to sit here and read it. I think it's a fitting one. It's Destin School Choice Week. We have school choice operationally in place here in Destin with our new high school. It's the Destin Charter School. And so people are exercising their ability to have school choice. So at this time, I'd like the City of Destin proclamation, the Destin School Choice Week, January 23rd through the 29th. Whereas all children in Destin should have access to the highest quality education possible, and whereas Destin recognizes the important role that an effective education plays in preparing all students in Destin to be successful adults, and whereas quality education is critically important to the economic vitality of Destin, and whereas Destin is home to a multitude of high-quality public and non-public schools from which parents can choose for their children, in addition to families who educate their children at home, and whereas educational variety not only helps to diversify our economy, but also enhances the vibrancy of our community. And whereas Destin has many high-quality teaching professionals in all types of school settings who are committed to educating our children, and whereas School Choice Week is celebrated across the country by millions of students, parents, educators, schools, and organizations to raise awareness of the need for effective educational options, now therefore I, Gary Jarvis, Mayor of the City of Destin, do hereby recognize January 23rd through January 29th, 2022 as Destin School Choice Week, and I call this observance to the attention of all our citizens. Thank you. All righty, up next, item 2A, public comments. I just want to remind the agenda, except for the public hearings, and we do have 3 public hearings tonight, so leave those. There'll be an opportunity to speak publicly at those times. So, without further ado, and I see Miss Carrie is already up here. Come on up, ma'am. You know the routine, and you know where the button's at.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I want to wish you all a happy new year coming into the new year, and thank you for taking the time to hear me this evening. I wanted to touch base, if I can real fast, about last meeting. The council heard from Jennifer from the TDC, and I really need to touch on this because I don't think anybody had mentioned this, but we really have to be aggressive in the transparency when we start doing these little adventure. When you go out to the Crystal Beach area and you take up 3 beach accesses and you set up a popsicle stand on a small business, should be considered the popsicles that they served up last year were from Iverness, Florida. We have 2 distributors right here in Destin that have been contacted. If we're going to start giving free things away, which I'm not even happy with, and I thought we had all had that conversation about free. And I want to go back too and ask about the Kindness Act. I'm not quite sure why the TDC is pushing to give free things away. But my example to you, Mayor, might be, in the event it was rodeo month or snapper season, let's say the TDC comes in and brings 3 charter boats and offers up free charters for all the tourists. You know, imagine the outrage. Don't minimize small businesses. I might not be as important as a charter boat, but I've helped build this community as well as my family. So here we are, 10 days away from February. Miss Jennifer had this conversation with the council, but she's not contacted anybody. You know, we have a lady right here, Mrs. King, and she has a company right here. And my idea actually went out to Jennifer when I met with Commissioner Ponder, had called me and we met. And I gave her the ideas about the popsicles and the color codes on the wrappers and stuff. If you're gonna do it right. Do the flag system, do something educational. And one of the beauties of working with a local company, Mrs. King can make all the colored popsicles you want. If it's a bad day, serve red popsicles. I assume you not serve anything out on our routes, but she's not reached out to any of the vendors here. And I think that there should be that this council should be aggressive in transparency and making sure that the Destin businesses are priority. I'm not for giving anything free away on Crystal Beach. I really want to be aggressive about that. It's really kind of bizarre to feel like you're going out to work every day and competing with your own county. You know, that shouldn't be in business at all. That was it, and I just wanted to perhaps have some type of transparency in making sure that some of these local businesses do get contacted by the TDC if they're going to do things. I think that's all. I just wanted to make sure that we don't leave that because we're coming into spring. We're 10 days away from February, which means that she's got her connections, and it's nobody from Destin. So,
Ma'am, did you happen to watch her presentation?
I did. I watched it on TV. Yes, sir.
Have you reached out to Jennifer,
I met with her and Commissioner Ponder.
like, in the past couple of weeks since the
No.
presentation?
This was at the end of the season,
Okay.
not
Well,
since the presentation.
I can't speak for what Ms. King has or hasn't done, but one thing that Ms. Adams reiterated, because I actually asked her to reiterate it, was for everybody to contact her and her office. All local businesses, all local people, anybody and everybody local that has a service or a product to contact her and her office. So I agree with you about the local businesses, but maybe you should let Ms. King or anybody else know to contact their office directly, because
Well,
if
let
they
me-
do contact that office directly and they choose to use an out-of-town business instead of a local business, I agree with you. That is frustrating, but it's also the owner's responsibility to reach out to them. Not saying they did or didn't, but I just wanted to reiterate that for Ms. Adams.
So I'm going to say that actually Jennifer did reach out to Ms. King, and if you really want to know the truth.
I
the
didn't
president-
want to go into their story.
no,
I'm just
I'm not.
saying for the public to make sure they reach out to Ms. Adams' office.
Okay.
I wouldn't rely on Ms. Adams to reach out to them. That's all I'm saying. So,
Well, as a business owner.
Sure.
I'm going to tell you how mortifying it is to go out to your route in July 4th weekend and find
Yes,
a
ma'am.
county out there.
yes, ma'am.
How did I know?
I hear you, but that's
I
this
come to
coming
these meetings,
season.
and as the mayor knows, I come to these meetings,
ma'am.
and I had no idea that was going on.
I hear you. I think coming
So-
up this season, we're expecting things differently, and I hope she does that differently. And hopefully these owners will contact them. That's all I'm saying.
She should know the local businesses here, period. She should know who we are. Okay, anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Carrie, the staff and I have a meeting with her on the 31st at 9 a.m., and I will put that on our agenda to discuss, okay? And let her know that y'all are happy to meet with her. And I'm not defending her, but I've known Jennifer for years. She came from Gulf County, and Gulf County's a little bit different. So they probably don't have the vendors that we have, or the small businesses that we have. And so
We don't have any vendors on our parks, so,
Yeah, and so.
correct? We have no vendors at our city parks or at county parks.
No, just the county at this
Yeah,
point.
just-
Okay, all right.
We got them at the soccer field.
The
And I-
soccer field is our
Over
soccer
here at
field?
the concession stand?
Yeah, we own that, though. That's us. That's,
They leased that out as a contract.
but I think by ordinance, we're not allowed to have,
That's correct.
we're not allowed to have vendors on our beach accesses or even our beach parks. Right.
Correct. Would that to be include the county? Because I've tried for 28 years to
Well,
get there.
they're not selling a product, so to be technical,
No.
okay? And they're also participating in the $22 million beach access purchase. So
Mayor,
that-
we're not defending giving away free product on an enterprise such as myself. Like I said.
No,
if-
I'm just-
What if they
I'm
showed
just-
up with 3 charter boats during snapper season from
understand,
one end
Carrie.
of the harbor to the
I'm
other?
just,
Okay.
I'm saying there's a little bit of difference here. So the best thing to
Right.
do is what Jim's doing, and this is something that's very fixable. You
No,
just need to talk with Jennifer.
She's absolutely delightful, and I had some really good ideas with her. I didn't like the popsicles too because there was trash everywhere. People just throw the trash. I just think we can come up with better solutions than free things. Educational things, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, does anyone else over here on this side of the room want to come up and speak? Seeing none? Anyone over here? You guys aren't allowed to? We hear from you sooner or later anyways. All right, well then, at that point, I'll close the public comment period. I just want to remind everyone that's here tonight, there will be another opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting, to make any comments of what you've seen, or during our discussion, something comes to mind that you'd like to share with the council. All right, next up, item number 3, consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion at this point.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion, I have a second. Take a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. City Manager's report. We have Mr. Webb Warren as our acting city manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For our residents who are tuning in, our city manager, Lance Johnson, is spending some well-deserved time with his family this week, so I have the privilege for filling in for him tonight. Our next item is the Underground Consultants of Northwest Florida, the probable cost of undergrounding. The undergrounding of utilities project is an initiative identified as part of the city's strategic plan. City Council in March of 2021 accepted the project management agreement with Utility Consultants of Florida. A task order was approved by Council in April that requested UCOF to identify conceptual phases for the entire city undergrounding project and prepare an opinion of probable cost for Phase 1, which is the area from Marler Bridge to Airport Road. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mark Horter, our project manager, as well as the COO of Underground Consultants of Florida, who will be providing a presentation for us tonight. So without further ado, Mr. Porter.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and council members. We're happy to be here tonight. Thank you for taking the time. I know back in December, we had put these together for the opinion of probable cost. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it. I want to respect your time tonight and just be brief, but I wanted to kind of highlight a few of the sections just to kind of point some things out. Most of it's things that you're probably already aware of, but I apologize, I don't have my distance glasses today, so I'm going to work from my screen here, make sure this is working. So in section 1, what we really did was basically just kind of walk through the executive summary of all the subsequent sections through there and kind of walked and outlined some things. Obviously, you're aware of the improved safety of, reduction of potential hazards, having lines that fall, poles down, ingress and egress from emergency vehicles. So obviously, there's a significant improved safety factor, and then better reliability. You've got things right now that have aggressive environment that over time deteriorates the lines. Having them underground, you do have a little bit better longevity to that system, and just a lot of, back to the safety issue. And then improved aesthetics. A lot of the projects that we finish, it really kind of creates a gateway coming into the city limits. It really makes such an impact. I think at the last presentation, we had provided some before and afters on some projects with some video, so it's an exciting point of the project. So we kind of walked through that. We did at that section, or towards the end of that section, we did put the cost, but I want to kind of defer that to the end because I know that's probably the most important thing of the document. So what we tried to do in this was identify the phasing. So what we've done is we've created 7 phases, and they were broken out geographically, but they also took in logistical start and end points, and also we tried to dissect that to make sense from a scope and size of a project, cost of the project. So with that being said, if council decided we'd like to see phases blended, put together, ran side by side concurrently. We have those options. So this is really just kind of a platform of what would make a logical rollout of these phases. But like I said, they can be, council has the opportunity, we can expand or adjust those with consideration of those points. The first phase is primarily the US 98 corridor from the West End Bridge to Airport Road, as most of you know. And then the subsequent phases are those extensions beyond US 98 to the east. Then we kind of went north and south and kind of did the same thing, went to the direction. So again, they can be split up however you would like to see them. All we did on this, I won't go through there, they're in the back of the brochure, but it basically just identifies those same phasing and how you actually have some sections that are already undergrounded. Although some of them are already undergrounded, they could be radial, so we're going to have to kind of open up some of the transformers and see if they need to be looped, but for the large part, we've identified that. We just wanted to kind of show as you go into those phases which sections are already undergrounded. And then in this slide here, it's basically showing some of the current land uses. You can see the CRA districts identified in those phases, and so it kind of lets you know within those phases what impacts it might have on certain sections within the city. The next section was basically the data collection, looking at a lot of the existing infrastructure. We spent quite a bit of time out looking at the assessment. Obviously, FPL has a primary feeder and several primary feeds that go through their feeds, a lot of the commercial businesses, critical equipment. Then the communication lines, what we wanted to do and what's critical with that is you want to kind of be in front of the communication carriers because they're attached to the poles. What we want to do is kind of capture any betterment, not implying that the carriers will try to expand that infrastructure, but what we want to do is just make sure that we're covering you for what's there and putting that underground, not expanding that infrastructure. So just wanted to kind of point that out. And then FDOT, I know you're all aware that there's a lot of, future improvements. There's a study being done. We've been in discussions with FDOT. We're looking throughout the project, we'll continue to look at any opportunities. If there's some advantages to, get our section done ahead of time or during the construction or following, we're taking that in heavy consideration and making sure that they're aware of what we're proposed so that that also can work with them. What's critical in the US 98 corridor is because you have such limited right-of-way, we want to make sure that when we strategically put equipment locations, switches, and transformers, that they're not just placed for the immediate project, but taking consideration any future expansion. So we just want to let you know, just pointing out, we're kind of looking ahead of that. That's pretty common on a lot of these projects. I won't go into a lot of detail. This kind of captures, we have roll plots, there are pages and pages. We put a couple in here, but that just kind of shows you a little bit of a view of the project, some of the current major feeder line that's in there. So the process in 3 kind of talks about the design. Obviously, all the utility companies are doing their own independent design. FPL's doing theirs, the communications are on theirs. We work side by side, make sure all those pieces are ready to go. So when we do the project delivery, they're ready, they're available, and they're accurate. So with FPL, the main thing is the engineering deposit. They require an engineering deposit for the, for the phase. And once that's paid, concurrently you have to collect survey data that supports that design effort. So we're already kind of working to get those steps in place once the council decides as to what direction proceeding with the project. We're already kind of looking at that. So we kind of talk through that process in there. That engineering deposit obviously is reimbursed to you with the BCE when you pay, it comes back to you. So just basically fronting it, they want to make sure you're truly moving forward with the project. I talked about the survey transformer and equipment locations. Like I said before, I won't labor on that, but basically we take a lot of pride in trying to find the most ideal locations. That's really where it becomes critical, where we can come in and kind of change that design with FPL and the carriers, is to work with community, business. You got a lot of businesses on the major corridor and then residential sections. We're very mindful as to where those equipment locations are, rather than just say this is where it's designed, this is where it's going to go. We want to kind of look at those things. I'm sorry.
I have a question. When you're dealing with Florida Power and Light, how amicable are they on maybe changing some of their existing transfer stations and stuff like that? Is that something that you just have a engineering type discussion with? Like, what can you do? What's more, workable for the undergrounding project?
Yes, sir. So day in, day out, we work through that with them. We change locations all the time. We know, there's obviously standards and restrictions. You can't go certain distances, but we move, I'd say probably somewhere, to be conservative, I'd say 50% of the equipment locations, we move them to locations that we find are better. But what we try to do is, what you don't want to do, and we'll talk about this in a minute when you get to construction, is we don't want to make those changes in construction. We want to kind of capture those during the design, because you don't want change orders. We don't want, we want to have that plan ready to go and in place, so. But no, that's a good question. So it's very common, but obviously we have some limitations. One thing that we didn't spend a lot of time in the report was basically street lighting, because every municipality seems to have their own, city vision and planning that they want to do. But just keep in mind as we move forward what that plan might be. We'd be more than happy to work with you. Every beach community, I think we've got about maybe 9 ongoing projects right now on coastal communities for undergrounding, and they all have different visions of what they want for street lighting. So just, FPL recently, because obviously Gulf Power's been taken over by FPL, and they've recently come up with a catalog with streetlight poles now that are a little bit more aesthetically pleasing than in the past. So, personally, it would be your decision. Is I don't really necessarily know that owning them is the best, because you got to replace them and maintain them, and maybe that option would work for you, but that, obviously that's your decision. But we'd be more than happy to kind of share those options and let you look at multiple options. Just something not to forget. So the section 4 is just basically the phasing and sequencing, kind of talking through how the project will roll out. I won't go into labor on a lot of that. Obviously, the phasing would, a lot of that can depend on what you guys might want to look at on that. Work program considerations, we talked about the DOT, but we also want to keep in light that you guys have improvements as well as the county, so we just want to make sure that's all captured in our planning. Cost, I can assure you on all the projects that we're working on, we're going to be here to really fight hard to make sure that this project is done at the most economical means. I can, at the end of this, I can share with you, we got a lot of projects. The one thing I'm happy to report as of right now for a lot of the projects, and one of the major ones that we talked when we first came onto this project was Longboat Key, because its similarity in size and nature. We're about probably 80% complete with that project. A lot of the boring will be wrapped up maybe in February. We had $2 million contingency set aside. We've used 0 of it. So it's just planning, having this stuff done and during design, because that's what that's my own thing. I really hate change orders and extra costs. So we have the same thing with Bel Air and some of our other projects that we completed as well, where 0 contingency was utilized. So we'll fight hard for that. And then traffic control. We know that you guys have experienced quite a few traffic closures. Obviously, that's a little bit different in nature, because those closures involve lanes that are down for a number of months, whereas our project will involve boring activities that kind of progresses. It really doesn't impact an area for a long time. Sometimes it might just be a few hours or a few days, but we're very considerate, especially when you're affecting businesses or people's access into their private residences. This section on project delivery methods, same thing, we kind of wrote in there, and you guys are already probably familiar. There's all kinds of different rolls out of project delivery methods, design build and bid build and another of them. On majority of our projects, we do a design build, and it's worked extremely well. Like I said, we've used 0 contingency. We secure rates and, linear for that. And then as we start getting in a lot of the designs, then we start putting them out. That kind of secures the cities to basically know what you're paying for per linear, that it's competitive and it's consistent with the industry standards. And then obviously best value and budget. So again, kind of like I alluded to in the previous slide, we want to make sure that this project's rolled out at the most cost-efficient approach throughout the entire phase. So the risk assessment, obviously every project has risk. Design stage is probably one of the biggest risks. And I say risk, but it really just basically you have to be on top of it and manage it well. The risk are that you're relying on the utility companies to design it. We know there's ways to get those designs done efficiently and a little quicker, and there's sometimes if you fall off, they can wind up taking, instead of 5 to 6 months, it could take 8 months to a year. So it's a risk, but it's a risk that we're aware of, and we stay on top of that to keep it within a schedule. The bid phase, obviously what we want to do is we want to kind of capture the interest of the contractors ahead of time. We've already been getting some interest. People are aware that the work's taking place in the Panhandle area. So we like to create a little bit of an environment to bring in competitive and basically bring them in prior to the procurement, hear from them, but also what our expectations are. We don't want expectations in the bid that are going to inflate those prices. So we want to be as transparent as possible and kind of get that feedback. So when we go into the procurement, we've kind of looked at things from our end, but also got their perspective on that. And then construction, the key thing with that really is just having a tight spec package. Basically, the spec really kind of can confine a lot of things and keep things. And then relationships, we're big on keeping relationships with the entire project team, including the contractor. And then, experience. Fortunately, the contractors that do this type of work, they're rare because they have to be qualified from the power company. So you're not dealing with a pool of contractors from all over. It's kind of a smaller pool. That's a fortunate thing because they're just, they're going to do a good job because they also need to maintain those big contracts with the power company. So it does kind of change things a little bit from that perspective. The public outreach. We know you already have some social platform or social media platforms. We can work with that, expand on that. There's so many different options. We kind of walk through it. One thing that we did say before and kind of works good is when you get in the construction phase, what we feel is really good is if you're transparent, and what we talked about is like there's different things where they do coffee with the contractor, where once every month or every other month, you can kind of support a local business, have a little coffee with the contractor, let the residents come in and basically ask questions. Contractors, it just seems like a lot of your constituents won't come asking you for a lot of, where are things at. We want to make sure that message is clear and that we're doing the right thing. And I think a lot of contractors have bought into that over the years, and it's sensitive. You're basically passing almost every parcel on the island, so it's very important to make sure that everybody knows what the plan is, and I think if that message is there, it really helps along the way. So here's the most important part of the report, and that's the opinion of probable cost that we put together. So the estimates, just to outline, I know we had mentioned that, we have several projects that have been recently completed, that are recently ongoing and pretty much close to completion. And then we also have some that just recently went out to bid, and we just got some of the bids. What we did was we looked at that past, we wanted the most recent information. Obviously, with inflation and everything, we wanted to take those things in consideration. So in putting those numbers together, we took units that are applicable to this specific type projects to similar, like I said, Longboat Key, very similar situation and size and stuff. Looked at those magnitudes. So those unit prices, what we put in this report, are really based on actual construction, today's cost. We're not going back and looking at areas that are kind of different. So just wanted to kind of point that out. Credits, we've been working with Chef. I know he's worked really hard through the franchise agreement. And FPL obviously has a tariff that outlines their credits. And as part of the franchise agreement, we've worked out, I think it's $770,000 per mile scenario credit. But regardless, we looked at those two credits, and they're about the same. So one or the other half, they're about the same. So we just wanted to incorporate those credits, and hopefully over time, the credits might increase as they go back and show that there's improvements with underground and cost savings. They pass that along. And then grant funding. One of our PMs wasn't available to make it tonight, but she's a little bit more involved with the grant funding. But we've been involved with projects where we just recently received a state appropriations for part of the undergrounding. There are certain grants that, like resiliency grants, that will contribute up to maybe 50% of that. So, and I know that Crystal's very involved in that. Jeff's been extremely helpful. So we've been working to try to come up to see if there's any way that we can offset this cost and find any grants, any money out there that we can do. We want to try to see what we can do on our part to help go through there. So this is the big number. I'm sure there might be some questions to this, so I left it for last. But the line one is the obvious. That's the FPL underground conversion. Then you've got the utility costs from CenturyLink, Cox, and Unity Fiber. Doesn't mean that they're in the entire span. Restoration, we looked at kind of how the project might roll out, where you have to pop in and pop out for your entry and exit pits for the boring, and then the FPL credit. For this section, that applies based off the franchise agreement with phase one. And then we have the construction management oversight, and then there's your 1.1 contingency that we wanted to just kind of put in there to have that account for. I do know that inflation is seemed to be a big discussion of recent, but we haven't seen, for instance, HDPE conduit that we use, we saw a little bit of a spike. It's gone back down. So I think with our industry, we haven't seen anything significant. The power companies supply. So FPL, when you send them to BCE, the contractor that we hire would do all the work. They pull the wire, they do the make ready with the equipment, set the equipment, but FPL supplies that material for you. So when you're dealing with a large outfit like that, which is technically NextEra, they have, purchasing power that's far greater. So you don't really see that where you got a smaller contractor that's borrowing, getting rock from a local borrow pit. So fortunately, because of that, we're not seeing that type of inflation. I really don't see anything that might be staggered. I could be wrong, but I think I'm pretty comfortable that we're not seeing anything that we're projecting. If anything, it probably could come down a little bit lower. So we did include the contingency for that, which comes up to a 12.8 million projection for that first phase. Keep in mind, this is the most complicated and challenging phase of all. I think it's a good start. I think one is it's going to be a significant gateway into the community to start the project. I also like to kind of go with the most challenging section first. I think that can really give a good taste in everybody's mouth for the community to see a successful project on one of the most challenging. So it's got some advantages, but it'll also be the biggest impact. It also should get easier as you start going east and you go north and south. Obviously, residential sections, this number would be fairly, significantly less because it doesn't have a lot of feeder, larger conduits, so the boring costs come down quite a bit. So we wanted to just kind of share that with you. With that, I just wanted to kind of see if maybe we can answer
Yeah, I got a
questions.
couple, Councilman Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And you said there was 7 phases?
7, so part of that task was to create the phase 1, but include the other phases for the project of what would make sense for a potential rollout of phasing, which is similar like, a lot of our bigger islands that, do in the entire project, they break it out in 5, 6, 7 phases. Longboat Key's 5 phases, but it's residential sections are kind of a little bit more compressed, so 5 phases worked out. So we came up with 7, but like I said, we could merge or blend those phases. We just tried to come up with something that made sense from, a construction timing standpoint and kept the cost in line with what, each section would.
Gotcha. At first glance, the 12.8 million really doesn't sound all that bad when you see in 7 phases, roughly $84 million. And I think Gulf Power, the numbers they were throwing around was $150, $200 million.
I think it was 160.
Yeah,
164
years
million.
ago. So it's that really doesn't sound that bad. So, but that's all I got. But thank you for.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. And I get, because I wasn't here when y'all were hired, so I have a couple of process questions. How much is Panama City Beach paying per mile for their undergrounding along Thomas Drive, which is their equivalent here?
I don't know, but I'll get you that answer. I actually tried to find that answer real
Okay.
quick. I don't, we're not involved with that project. We weren't aware when that went out. I do have other projects I could share with you that are local.
To me, I like apples to apples, so I want to know, basically, Gulf Breeze is doing a project, but I think they're just in the beginning. They may be just a little bit further along than us, and I know Panama City has already passed their phase 1, so they have a history because it's FPL, the old Gulf Power,
Yep.
and probably be the same, because if it's like most of these restricted, there's a group that works up in the north part of the state, there's a group that works down in Miami, and there's a group that works in the southwest. So we will probably get the most competitive bid from the folks that are doing Panama City. So I just want to know that. On the grants, I agree, because there's a lot of money in this year's proposed state budget for resiliency and some preparations for things like this. Do y'all apply for those grants? Do y'all assist our staff in applying for those grants, or does our staff apply for those grants? What's the process of identifying and applying and getting that money, other than us going to Representative Maney and saying, hey, can you get us $6 million to pay for half of this cost?
It's a good question. So we typically work hand in hand with staff. I know a lot of applications are probably underway where you've got, you're applying for grants and other things. I helped write the one for Bradenton Beach. We did an appropriations request for $2 million, and we received that last year. We put in for another one. So we're used to the language that's typically more specific to these type projects that go to those grants. We've also, fortunately, our involvement with those other projects, we can kind of see what's been captured. That appropriation, state appropriations, I think that was the first time that had ever been, that fund had ever been used for that. So that's exciting. So we're more than happy to work with staff, and we've kind of been, we monthly meet and have conversation and talk about that. So we're here to help write them. To what extent, I think the submission would go through town staff perhaps, but if whatever we need to do to help get it, we'll do everything we can on our end to get that done for you. And you mentioned Gulf Breeze, their project, so they were involved with that project. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I think they're $9.5 million for the first phase. It's about a 1.8 mile section, so it's a little shorter than yours. But that one's right at about $9.5 million. And if you look at that kind of, and the nature cost of foot, yours is a little bit under budget of what that one is. So, and I don't know that maybe, they're pretty similar. That one might be a little less construction side, maybe a little wider. They don't have a lot more right away, but just a little, an extra couple of feet helps. But if that kind of gives you an idea. And then Longboat Key, I know we had mentioned that several times. That project, we're about 80% complete. And that was originally around $34 million for about a 10-mile section. To kind of give you an idea, kind of, basically just a little bit over the cost for, actually just a little bit under what we have proposed for this project. But to that point, the unit cost, whether it's in Panama, down south, these contractors, they work all the, there's only a few of them. What we can, what we like to try to do too during that process is be transparent. You can see the cost per foot so that your cost is either better than theirs or at least consistent with that. So we like to kind of share that information, and we'll be looking at that.
I appreciate it. Better would be good, but at least consistent. That's what I
Absolutely.
want to see is Panama City Beach, and I don't know who the contractor is, if it's Maztec or whoever it is over in Gulf Breeze, but, it'd be probably a similar situation to what we have.
Absolutely. Yep.
Kevin?
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
A follow-up on Mr. Bagby's question about the grants, because I don't recall exactly our deal with you guys. I know you're very kind to help work with our staff. Is the continuing service contract, is grant writing, is that an item that's like an additional out-of-scope type of item? Or is that just, I don't know if that's a detailed thing that was in the contract, or?
I think we consider that as part of our current
Okay.
scope. We've been helping, we haven't really moved forward with it, but we've been helping all along, and it's never really technically been like an item, but it's very
Gotcha.
common for these projects where, you're doing things that aren't specific to every scope item, but in nature, it's the same thing. We would hate to, but Tanya, one of our PMs, I think she's been here for a couple of, I don't know if she's been here in front of council, but she's been to a couple of meetings. She specializes more in the grant. She spent quite a few number of years, I think about 15 to 20 years up in the Pentagon and helped with grants and stuff like that. So she's pretty familiar with the process. So we're happy to help. It's part of the process that we're already doing, so it wouldn't be extra.
Thank you. And then on the phase maps, maybe it's just the way it's all drawn, but like on 98, phase 1 touches, it looks like, phase 5 and phase 4 and phase 3, all on US 98? Is that just the way that the graphics are drawn? Or is US 98 from the bridge to Airport Road on both north and south sides of 98, all of phase 1?
Yeah, so phase 1 will encompass everything along the major corridor of US 98, and that includes, and that's where that map, if I go back to, let me go back to this slide real quick. Probably could have spent a few yeah, that one right there. So I can see from my computer, that kind of shows you that it doesn't just pick up the US 98 corridor, but it also picks up some laterals that, from a logistics standpoint, you need to pick those feeds up even though they're not necessarily. So when we say phase 1 is the US 98 corridor, it also would pick up laterals, crossings, and some, but we don't go back along like Main Street a mile. Main Street's a bad example because it's already underground and through there, but some of those other sections, we're going to pick up what makes sense along the US 98, but not to the extent that it would go far enough north or south that it becomes residential.
Sure. The way it looks is that phase 4 is along US 98 as well. And
Yeah, so
phase 5 is along US 98 as well. So
Yeah, we can change the graphics just to make it clear.
I just want to make sure
That's-
when phase one's done, then we're not going to be looking at lines
Yep.
on US Highway 98 still. You know?
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yep.
phase 5,
Yep.
you know?
No,
So,
good point.
Okay.
We can clean up the map a little bit.
Okay. And then, obviously, we haven't gotten phase 1 yet, but you asked us about, eventually we'll have discussions about changing phases, combining phases, streetlights and all that. When do you see, like, if we wanted to discuss changing the phases, timeline, when is that needing to be done? When is that discussion, decisions need to be happening?
I would say sooner than later. Our focus has been phase 1. I think it seems to be the
Obviously not
general-
changing phase 1, but.
Right, but the other phases, I think you can look at that as, maybe the best way to do it would be roll out phase 1, get that one started, and then you can kind of see how much of it you want to bite off. Here's a good example. Longboat Key had originally 5 phases. They merged 3 and 5 together. They cut it down to 4 because once they got it, they're like, you know what, let's take off a little bit bigger bite. It comes down to funding, I think. So we're happy to work with you and just basically say, you could look at it and, things change over the course of the year or two. You might say, we want to incorporate this. So I just didn't want you to feel like these phases are defined by that's the order that they
Sure.
have to take place.
And last one, and if you have the answer, is do you know why phase 3 was considered phase 3 on the unincorporated part of Destin, all the way to the east? Oh, I'm sorry, but the parts around the road are unincorporated. I'm just curious. Well, yeah, north side. Yeah, it's unincorporated, right? North side? Okay.
Yeah, and we left.
Sorry, I just didn't know if there's a reason why phase 3 was put that far out rather than within the greater city of Destin, residential areas and all the other stuff.
Oh, I got you. See, so where the purple line is saying kind of shorten that length so it doesn't, where
No,
phase 2 was
the
short.
orange line, the orange line, all the way east of Commons and east 98. I just didn't know if you know the reason why that was chosen as phase 3, if there's a reason of how you went from phase 1 to phase 7. Was it a cost thing, mileage thing? Was it?
Well, what we typically do, you don't have to do it this way. Bradenton Beach is all over the place. They'll do a side street and then they'll come back out on US 98 and things. What we thought would be critical is if you get the major feeder off of the main line corridor, it kind of opens up because the feeder is what basically feed all the residential communities. So for us, it's obviously the most expensive portion of it because it's the larger conduit, but at the same time what it's doing is that's the main feed going into residential. I can get that hot, and then as you decide to pick off into the residential communities, they're already kind of set up for those switches to go off off that feed. So that's the only reason we did that. We could absolutely do phase 1 and then jump north of phase 1 into phase 4. There's no real matter. It's really what preference is of council. But the whole idea was to get that major feeder underground because that's your most critical. Plus, what we're looking at from our viewpoint is that's your major thoroughfare. You want, for ingress and egress, if you get into emergency situations, I want to have US 98 clear. I don't have to have that risk. I'm not saying I don't want the residential, but you want to be able to get that major. So if you do have impacts to residential communities, you need to get those poles. If US 98's clean and clear, you're able to get those trucks in and out. And so that's really the idea
That's
behind our
fine.
logic.
I appreciate it. That's why you're here, and that's why we're supposed to ask you questions, right?
I love the
Rather than just look at
questions,
the colorful maps that looks like Skittles and just say,
I know.
okay, it looks good.
I know what's
So-
going on in the mind behind it, but
Thank you.
yeah. Anything we can do to enhance the maps or anything like that, always feel free to, we're more than happy to do that. We're happy to be part of this project.
Yeah, every time I Google a destination on Google Maps, it gives me 3 options. And so basically, you've given us a roadmap, and we can go whatever direction we want outside of phase 1 and 2, which I think in our discussions over the years, since we've been dealing with the franchise agreement, it was all about getting 98 hardened first. And you gave the good reason why, because when we do have the inevitable Hurricane Michael, that's how you get your community rebuilt the quickest, is having your main
Exactly.
thoroughfare open.
Exactly.
So-
Another thing that's important, and that's actually a really good question. I probably should have expanded a little bit more on the slides, but keep in mind too that over the years, they're going to go in and harden these sections, which means you can have those bigger concrete poles to replace the smaller ones that are out there now. You want to capitalize on getting that stuff underground before that because you lose a lot of your credits as those poles come in, your salvage value. So that's another reason why where the residentials, you really don't have that impact as much. So that's another consideration.
Okay, thank you. A lot of them were scope of work, so that got a lot of answered. So as far as phase one, what is like the timeline of, construction cones on 98 as far as logistics of where we are for having tourist season versus somewhat of an off-season now? I didn't know if there was able to start it during while we're slowing down, or is this something that's just going to be inevitable through the summer?
Good question. We've been talking about that. What we'd like to do is if council decides to move forward, we're not here to, decide as to when you might move forward with the project, but just kind of, throw out there what those options are and the cost. With that being said, I think that, there's some pieces that need to be done. There's an engineering deposit that needs to be made to FPL, and then it would have to, concurrently, we need to get survey for that design started. We can, we're already working through that in case that decision comes that we can move forward. Ideally, what we've been looking for is we'd like to have a fall start. We know that your season comes to an end. We'd really like to take that opportunity. That's a really good window. We always kind of account in our schedule seasonality. We're expecting anywhere between a, 18-month window for that construction. But keep in mind, there's a lot of parts and pieces. There's a lot of boring you can do in an off-season to get that part caught up. And then when the season comes back in, you get the influx of residents and visitors, then we can jump on the items that really don't impact that traffic flow or those. Obviously, the businesses, it's a critical livelihood of having that, so we want to make sure that's in place. So ideally, the fall, and then we would plan the construction accordingly to make sure we got as much as we could that wouldn't interfere with businesses, and then go into the slower side of construction during that busy season.
Awesome, thank you. And then do any other cities, have you found that they lay, I guess, more of the communication side for Cox and others, as far as internet fiber getting stronger and faster internet? Is that something that would be on them to attach and put in this with you guys before the burrowing?
That's a great question. So right now, Longboat Key is invested in infrastructure to put their own conduit in so that they can kind of provide, they want to look at that future connectivity for that service. At the same time, you've got a lot of these fiber companies that are coming out, they're deploying 5G, a lot of fiber in there. There's just so many options for you with that decision. You're probably already seen, I think I saw a couple of already 5G poles that they've set out there. Obviously everybody's trying to get out in front of that aesthetically, try to make sure it matches. You're removing a bunch of poles, you don't want a bunch of 5G poles. So we can definitely, if there's some advantages, whatever the city decides to do, that's the opportunity to do that while you're boring, get that in. At the same time, when I was talking before, when we have the carriers that attach the poles, our goal for the town or city is to get those utilities undergrounded as part of the undergrounding project, which you would be required to do. What we don't want to do is expand, infrastructure at the city's expense for that stuff. But if the opportunity there for them to do that during that project, it happens all the time. So it's kind of so many different scenarios, but we're more than happy if y'all see a vision for that. Anything that we can do to incorporate that or we're going to be talking with the carriers. We've already been engaged with them. If that's, I don't know how y'all's signal is out here. It seems fairly well, but, a lot of cities decide they want to kind of enhance that 5G or 4G.
I run a video production company, so having gig up and down speed, like right now for most users is good. I think to attract a little bit more modern companies, if we could really just be on the forefront of that, I think, not just for me, but, we're always trying to economically diversify, so I think the fibers would be really important to throw in there if possible. And then I guess a smaller last question, how close can you plant a tree to the underground borings? Once the lines are in, what's like a threshold or a common area?
200 feet.
Come on, give me a little bit more than that.
Yeah, it's not advisable to go over top of, conduit systems because ultimately the roots and stuff would grab them. However, with that being said, we bore right underneath, it's really a non-invasive operation. We bore under, obviously every community we're in, they've got a lot of mature trees, and it's right out the gate. We don't want to lose this landscaping. These are trees that are 100 years old. We're very mindful of that, so we bore around them. So we typically would bore. So if the city has plans to do landscape improvements in certain areas, We would want to know that so we can kind of allow for that, but a lot of the landscaping wouldn't happen within that pocket because I think Winter Park did that. I think they had a bunch of undergrounding that they did, and then they put oak trees over it. And, they grew up, and I don't think there's been that much of an impact to it, but, definitely want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about putting them on top. I was more worried on Calhoun, more heritage trees there, and then if there's any way to plant 98 with these in the future.
Yeah, I think we'd be all right. We'd just have to kind of look at the area, but that's a good point. Another thing, back to your 5G question, you can always, if I'm a contractor and I'm boring, and, if it costs me, just throwing a number out there, $14 a linear foot to bore, a communication conduit, to add another conduit to that is just a fraction of that price, because the big price is getting that rig set up. So if you do, that's kind of what Longboat Key did, said we just pay that incremental cost to add that additional conduit. It gives us that opportunity to have that extra one. So when 5G deployment does come, you've got that ability to kind of
So
house
the
that.
city took upon itself to add that extra cable, not the companies.
Correct.
That's something we haven't talked about.
All right, fair enough.
All right. All
Thank
right.
you. Thanks for having me tonight. Hope everybody has a good new year.
All right, thank you. We'll see you soon. All
you,
right, back to you there, Webb.
Thank you, Mayor. The next item is our Visioning and Strategic Plan Review session. The 2022 Destin Visioning and Strategic Planning Session will be at 5:30 on January 27th, right here. I'm sorry, at 5:30, I said that, 8:30, right here in the Annex Council Chambers. Ms. Laura Rakes will be facilitating this visioning session. As with last year's session, we will review at a high level the status of our current plans, elements, and also gather information to assist in the planning of projects and initiatives, as well as budget for fiscal year '23. Since most of the projects and initiatives included in our current plan requires multiple years to complete, we are not looking to make major plan changes to the existing plan, but looking to reaffirm our commitment to the current plan and identify tweaks to the priorities that the council desires. We are also looking for potential future projects and initiatives to be identified so that staff have adequate time to research the resources that these would require prior to the beginning of fiscal year 2023. That budget cycle for '23 begins in late May, and this process will help because council will have the data they need to make fact-based decisions for allocating funds. Staff has provided a draft agenda and is asking that council provides input for any further direction or approval of that proposed agenda.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Only thing I was going to bring up, and see if there's any other council members that have thoughts. Some have done this a number of times and some not yet, and this will be my second one, is to have a public comment section added, an additional one, or to somehow ensure that there is opportunity for public speaking during some of the discussions that happen in the end, because we have public comment in the beginning, and then we hear from our amazing staff and department heads about all sorts of projects and wishes and different things, and then we all talk, and we make decisions, and there's been no further follow-ups from the public based on what we have said or thrown out there or discussed.
In the past, since I've been mayor, I kind of, as we're going through it, we've always kind of, when we're on a certain subject matter that we're talking about as part of the visioning, we always, if there's somebody in the audience that you could tell wants to say some stuff like that, we haven't really kept it rigid. We've allowed public input during the course of the visioning session. And I think that might be the most efficient way, because sometimes some of the stuff we talk about, nobody has anything to say. Having a set public deal kind of early in the game kind of sets the tone a little bit. But as we're bringing up, you have a particular thing you want to talk about, and there's, it's almost like a group visioning session, and that's how we've done it in the past, and I was assuming that's how we do it this time.
I'm glad to hear that.
If
That's fine.
sounds good to
So
you.
I'll make a motion to move to accept the agenda for the 2022 Visioning and Strategic Plan Review Session.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Mr. Braden, you got a comment?
Yes, sir. The only thing I wanted to add was, I know staff's bringing back, what we started with and what's left to finish. And I know we didn't last year, we didn't pile a whole lot more on, because that's just been a problem over the years is, we got a whole list and we need to finish it. And if we just keep piling more stuff on, we just never gonna finish what we started last year before last. So just need to kind of keep that,
The
abreast.
good news is we accomplished some of the visioning stuff with the intergov, and so we, since you and I've been on here in the last 3 years, some of that stuff has been accomplished, so we do have a little bit of room for some new stuff, so that's good, but, as you well know, because you've been in as many as, or more than I have, that we'll keep it along those lines, and like I told Kevin, we try to let it be it's a public workshop type format, even though it's got some specific staff reports and specific things that each one of y'all want to talk about. So, and we do have a facilitator too that'll be involved with some of it. So, all right, we have anything else, Rodney? You good? We have a motion, we have a second. Let's go ahead and take a vote. Ayes have it, so moved.
Finally, I do have a few brief announcements for tonight. At the February 7th City Council meeting, we will be having 2 items that staff will be providing briefings on. The first is the Crosstown Connector. Staff will provide a briefing on updated 60% plans, which incorporate previous council directives. The second is waterfront access. Staff will be providing a briefing on the inventory of properties with waterfront access, along with recommended actions on those properties. Also, many thanks to Business View magazine for featuring the City of Destin in their December issue. The article covered current and future city initiatives and projects that focus on protecting and enhancing the Destin brand, to include the acquisition of more public beaches, new park developments, improved mobility throughout the city, and highlighting our area's tourism development. This article is available on all our social media platforms, and the email was sent to council on January 11th. And then last of all, the mayor's annual State of the City address will be taking place just prior to the city council meeting on Monday, February 21st, where Mayor Jarvis will highlight the City of Destin's accomplishments and strategic plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, up next, 5A. It's the first of 3 public hearings. Mr. Bobbin, you got the floor.
Thanks, Mayor. This is the first reading of ordinance number 2124 PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the future land use map as referenced in Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan to include a change in the future land use designations of the parcels described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from Crystal Beach Resort, CBR, and Crystal Beach Neighborhood, CBN, to Recreation, REC, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for future land use map amendment, providing for incorporation into the comprehensive plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. This is parcel ID number 002S2205900000CA and 002S220584000030.
I was keeping track of all the zeros. This is a public hearing, so what I'm going to do now is open up the public comment portion of it, of the hearing. Is there anyone that wants to speak to the first reading of ordinance 21-24-PC? Seeing no one making a dash up to the podium, I'm going to close the public comment portion of it, and I'll entertain the motion at this time.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. And I have a second. Is there any comments anybody wants to make? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved. Kyle?
Thanks, Mayor. Next, we have 5B, the first reading of ordinance number 2115 PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, creating a new chapter of the City of Destin's comprehensive plan, property rights element pursuant to state law, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for title and jurisdiction, providing for transmittal to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, providing for incorporation into the comprehensive plan, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
And once again, this is a public hearing. And so I'll open up the public comment portion of the hearing at this time. Is there anyone that wants to make any comments on the first reading of ordinance 21-15-PC? Seeing no mad dash to the podium, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period, and I'll entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make that motion, Mayor. I move the city council approve proposed ordinance 21-15-PC, property rights element on the first reading, and direct city clerk to transmit the ordinance to the Department of Economic Opportunity.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I do have a second. Rodney, is there anything else you wanted to add, or is it you were
No,
going to make the motion?
That's all. Thank you.
All right. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, take it to a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, Mr. Bowman.
All right, last one, 5C. First reading of ordinance number 2125 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the official zoning map as referenced in the Land Development Code, Section 7.12.01A2, zoning maps to include a change in the zoning designations of the parcels described and generally depicted in the attached Exhibit A from Crystal Beach Resort, CBR, and Crystal Beach Neighborhood, CBN, to Recreation, Rec. Providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for zoning map amendment, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Parcel ID numbers 002S220590, 00000CA, and 002S220584, 00000030.
Thank you, sir. This is our last public hearing, and again, I will open up this for public comment. Seeing no one making that mad dash, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of it, and I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Any further discussion, gentlemen? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved. Mr. Braden.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
0.
I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. First thing I have under my name is the motion, and I'll go ahead and make the motion. I move to increase the city manager's base salary by 5% and the city manager's monthly vehicle allowance by $100 from $400 to $500, retroactive or effective January 1st, 2022.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I do have a second. Any discussion? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mayor. What the $500 vehicle allowance, what's that go to? Does he have his own vehicle and that just pays for gas, mileage, or what's that for?
Yes.
That is correct. That is a monthly stipend for use of his personal vehicle for city business.
Which is gas money.
It pays for all expenses related with this vehicle and assists with the vehicle itself. This is standard provision within our previous city manager's contract.
I'm just asking because I was asked these questions. And when he goes out of town, he takes a city vehicle or takes his own vehicle?
As far as I'm aware, he takes his vehicle.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Bagby? No, I'm sorry, Ms. Schmidt. Sorry.
I appreciate it. Some of the similar questions that Mr. Braden was asking was about the vehicle. I guess I just didn't know if there's any more, if we should think about doing any more specific requirements on, to understand the reason for having an allowance is for maybe to go rent a vehicle, or I'm sorry, to lease one or buy one or whatever, but do other city employees have the option to use city vehicles as well, like that don't have an allowance? He's the only one that has an allowance, city manager?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would just assume that if he's going to have an allowance, that he would use his personal vehicle all the time. That would be my thoughts. So I don't know if that's we don't have that as a requirement though, right? If he wants to grab the keys for the city vehicle, he can grab the keys. Gotcha. Okay. The only other thing I was going to possibly throw out there is I did some calculations, and I didn't know if there was anything that you had, Mr. Bagby, for the 5% particular reason, or is that just a number that you set at? I was going to propose something different in a substitute motion, but didn't know if there was any background into the 5% number.
Well, my understanding is the city staff, to include the city manager, have gotten 2% increase every year for the last 3 years. So now the city manager has not gotten an increase, a merit increase or a performance increase in 3.5 years since he's been the interim and the city manager. My understanding is the staff got 3%, was eligible, not got, was eligible for up to 2% for each of those 3 years. Now, if you did that, it would be a little over 6% if you compounded that, obviously, for those. And 5%, I was throwing that out because I've known him for a long time, but I haven't evaluated him for the last 3 years. I think there's only one person here that has been in a position to evaluate him for the last 3 years. But to me, that is a minimum. If you want to suggest something higher, I'll support that 100%. But to not give our staff leader a raise in 3.5 years, to me, is just unconscionable.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to be fair. I was trying to be fair to him. I was trying to be fair to the other staff members, some of whom haven't seen 5% total in the last 3 years. So I just wanted to be fair to everybody involved. And I tried to, I guess, ameliorate him not getting the entire 6% by saying, well, we should give him an increase because he hasn't had an increase in his vehicle for 3.5 years either. I know Greg, when he was the city manager, my last term on council, he bought a brand new F-150. I don't know what his payments were. I don't know how much he spent on gas, but he took that truck to county commission meetings, TDC meetings, all over the state. And I know, not Clarice, but the other lady, she did the same thing. So we ought to be fair to our staff lead. And if you want to make a substitute motion to make a bigger number, I'll second that.
Yeah, okay. I appreciate the explanation. I think with the additional $100, that makes up that additional $1,200 difference between the 5% and 6%, because I was calculating the 2% over each year and was getting to the 6%. So, but I think that extra $100 ultimately evens that out. So I'll support that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd like to add to what Jim said is this council hired him in-house. He'd already been employed for a long time with the city. Y'all believe, the older council believed that he was the best man for the job. I think he's done an exceptional job. Some of it was learning as he's gone. He's seen us through some really difficult times, a pandemic for crying out loud, losing a third of his staff for the most of the year in 2020, and we're dealing with it again. So I think this is fair. I wouldn't go any lower. I think we're going to get our money's worth, and from here on out, we'll go through a regular evaluation process every single year during the budgetary process. And I got Mr. Brady.
Thank you. My thought process is a little bit different. Yeah, Lance has been here working for the city for a long time, but this council gave that man an incredible opportunity that nobody else would have gave him. I mean, he couldn't have put his hat in the ring to be a city manager for the state of Florida and got hired from being a Parks and Rec manager in the city of Destin. So we gave him an incredible opportunity, and to go back, I think, to go back and give him the 5% or the 6% because he didn't get the 2% the first year, the 2% the second year, or 2% now. I mean, I'd gave my arm and a leg to have that opportunity. I'd gave up my 2% or 5% for a couple of years to get the opportunity to have that learning experience, and we gave him time to learn and evolve and become a city manager, and we worked with him and give him time to learn, and the staff has helped him out a bunch. So I think that is a tremendous pay or tremendous opportunity to be given to somebody. So, I mean, I would support, it's time to give the man a raise, if it's 2%, 3%, then that's what I would support. But to go back and give him, 2% for the last 2 or 3 years, I just don't think I can support it. That's all I have, Mayor. Thanks.
All right. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Jim. I was gonna
No,
take it to a
and
vote.
I appreciate that, and he did get an opportunity, but he earned that opportunity by his service to the city, in my mind, and I worked with him before. You know, he took part in the strategic planning and helped the city, the Parks and Rec Department. I mean, if you look at where we are versus where we were in 2006, we've come a long way. So I just want to be fair. He earned the opportunity, and to me, I mean, I'll be honest with you, and you hire people, and Kevin hires people, Bobby, I know, hires people. You know, we gave our staff 2 raises in the last 12 months because they were there. They stayed there. They worked through all the challenges we faced, and so maybe he shouldn't be limited by what we say to the rest of the staff. Well, you can only get a 2% performance. He, as Mr. Destin's pointed out, he gets whatever the heck the majority of us say. If that's 10% one year, so be it. But I just think he's earned it, and to have not gotten a raise for 3 years, and not, you know, said, the heck with it, I'm going to go apply, because now he has experience as a city manager, go apply someplace else. He's stayed here, he's been loyal to us, he's been loyal to his staff, he's been loyal to this council, and he deserves, in my mind and in my heart, at least 5% and the $100 a month. That's all I got to say.
All right, well, we got a motion, we got a second, we've had discussion, and we're going to take this to a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. All right, Jim, it looks like you have a nomination.
I do, I have a nomination. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to submit Todd Bure's name to be my nominee for the LPA.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. We don't allow any discussion for this, because if you volunteer, you're it. Kevin? Ayes have it. Ayes have it. I think I think Todd will be a great addition to the LPA. He's got good qualifications. All right.
That's all I have.
Teresa's disposed at the moment, and so is Mr. King. So, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you. 2 requests, please. The Crosstown Connector update. Could you please provide kind of a timeline when you do the update, like where we first started and maybe some major issues that have created a possible delay over these years or whatever, just to kind of have an idea of where we started time-wise to where we are today, or on the February 7th or whatever it is. Can we throw that in there? Just, you know, I wasn't here during this gap, but I've heard different things from different people about reasons and whatever. I just would like to see a visually kind of an understanding of where we started and where we are. Is that too much to add to the short notice?
Oh, no, it started before some of us were even born.
Have a what? Have what?
I was just joking. I was just joking.
drunk?
I said
What?
it started even before some of us were even born.
Oh, yes, I got you. Yeah. Very good possibility. So just because, you know, I mean, I think we've talked about it a couple times since I've been on council, and I know that's what the update's probably going to be for, but I just specifically would like to at least see that as well.
Yeah, but we'll do that.
Thank you, sir. Livery vessels, it's January 18th. I know we have deadline coming up end of April, or when's the deadline for livery vessel applications?
That really doesn't matter.
Oh, hello. Speak to me.
The deadline is actually the last day in February.
Okay. I would love, at the next meeting, because that's going to be in February 7th, I would like to know full update, where we're at with current applications, amount, how many we should be having, why, where, if we haven't even received them. And I want to know what our plan is on February 29th or March 1st or whatever that day is. What's the city's plan to do for everybody that's not turned them in?
I could give you an update right now if you'd like, and then I could give you another one just in 2 weeks.
I didn't want to throw you off guard, so
Nope, I'm
that's
good.
fine, sure.
I'm ready. I'm ready for you. We have a total of 5 that have registered. One that's not going to be able to because of the DO, and then we have the remaining that have not applied. As we're getting ready to send out a letter tomorrow to all liveries that haven't applied for a reminder. That'll be the 4th letter, I believe, that we've sent with no replies. As of the first day in March, the ones that haven't registered, we will be down there and we will be issuing violations for operating a livery without registration. And we will continue that. We'll take them to the magistrate and so on and so forth. So we're very serious about getting these guys registered. It's no different than your car. It's the same analogy. So they got to, register your tags, right? Same thing here. Register your vehicles, register your vessels before you operate.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So you said on March 1st, you're going to go down and issue notice of violations. Is that what you said?
Yes, we'll be doing, for every vessel they got to remember that every vessel that's operating, that's a violation. So if they got 20 vessels for that property, that's 20 violations.
Is that a violation warning?
What is that? Yeah, what does that mean? A violation?
Well,
So
we can
here's
give
your
them
warning.
by law, we have to give them their warning, which would be the notice of violation. We'll give them so many hours or days, It's got to be a reasonable time to register, which they can do it in 1 day easily through eGov.
So I want to interrupt you real quick, Joe, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
We've already given them a warning. You've given them 4 letters, you said.
They still have to trigger that violation.
I hear you, but in my opinion, you've been warned for months now and years because they know it's happening. So on March 1st, if I have 5 vessels and you're just going to come give me a little bit of warning, I'm going to keep going and keep going and keep going. So I want to see what do we need to do to put more of a heavier hammer down.
Jump in with the legal problem here.
Please.
It's not a problem. It's what Joey's.
What's the solution?
Yeah, well, you have to hear both. You have to know the problem to have a solution, but the solution's actually pretty easy, I think. But the problem is the statute requires a reasonable time to correct. The solution is shorten the time to correct because of everything you're saying. We gave out lots of warnings. They're ongoing. They're getting another one tomorrow. They've known all along about the deadline and so on. And so the reasonable time to correct can be 24 hours, I think. It's the code compliance officer's determination, not mine, but.
So do we need to have the city manager come up with that deadline? Do we need to direct the city manager of a specific deadline that the council wants, so that way it is now has to be enforced by council directive, not leaving it up to code enforcement?
I would not go that far, but I think if you make your policy clear that you want it handled in that way, that code compliance and the city manager will understand how to proceed. Because the statute does put in their discretion to determine what the reasonable time to correct is. But clearly, if the city council is saying that they believe that the business owners have had reasonable notice, then I think that staff and the city manager would take that into consideration.
Just so everyone knows, my directive to the harbor compliance officer is zero tolerance, because we have been down there, we've spoken with them, we've walked them through it, we've talked to them we've been messing with them for 2-3 years now. They know when they got to register. And we also gave them an extra 2 months to register. So there's no excuse why they haven't registered.
Yeah, my only thing is, and I understand, I think Kevin's and the staff's position, I understand the statute, that we have to give them the reasonable time. I would personally be wary of a 24-hour, because if everybody shows up, if you go give everybody their warning that you're required to give them on the 1st, and they all show up at your office on the 2nd, can you even process every one of those? So within the 24-hour period, because I don't think we can. I'll just be honest with you.
But they made the effort to come apply within the 24 hours
They're either in
point.
violation or they're not in violation. So
It-
we can't judge different effort. I drove by the city hall and it was
No, we
locked
can,
up.
because if they put their application on February 28th, they're still meeting the requirement. And even though it's February 28th, at that point, I don't want to speak for Joey or others, but I'm pretty sure we'll give them leeway, because even though they did wait to the last minute, which we don't like, they were allowed to wait until February 28th to submit their application, and they're no longer in violation. So on March 1st, they would not get a violation, I believe. But if on March 1st they had 24-hour notice, they should be in there within 24 hours applying. That would be my thought. But I don't want to keep going. I apologize, but I didn't even know Joey was going to say this. But I guess I just want at the February 7th meeting to hear a pretty strong what we're going to enforce and how how we're going to enforce it. And I want to support it from as a council. I'd like to, as a council, get behind and support it, because we played the game with them last year, my first year on the board, and now here we are with only 5 + 1 in. I mean, it's crazy. And so hopefully they'll come in the next few weeks. But I'd like to know, rather than the second meeting in February having 20 business owners here, yelling at, they might be yelling and all this, and here's the stories, and the computer wasn't working and whatever. I'd rather start at the first February meeting, so that way the second February meeting, when they come in front of me, I can say, sorry. But
Joey,
my
do you have
thoughts.
anything to add? And then Kim, I'll let you go.
Yeah, if I may say, if they're listening, we have a computer that they can use right up front in the lobby, so there's no excuse, and we can help them walk them through it. We're here to help them. We've been guiding them. The 5 said that it's gone very quickly, and it's been very fast for them, and they like the process, so there's just no excuse why they should be waiting any longer. It's about a 2-week turnaround, sir, and I'll have you a full update to show where we stand in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Joey. Kim?
I was just going to say to both council members' points that the notice of violation can be worded on March 1st such that you have to apply within 24 hours, but you don't actually have to be registered until, staff gets to it. So maybe we say 7 days or whatever it is. But we can have a graduated process in the NOV.
If I may have an alibi, if I can have an alibi real quick.
Yes.
Just to let everyone know, we did add all their applications into the system. So we did that for them. They just have to go in there and just update their livery list, any insurance policy that might have changed. That's it.
I appreciate it, Joey, and that's why I'm
Right.
agreeing with everything you're saying and wanting to make it very clear next first meeting of what this council will be hopefully doing if it's not done, because I agree with you, Joey, and everybody else on your staff.
And Mr. Smith, I'd like to add, and Kim, maybe you can answer this, because we did strengthen our livery vessel ordinance last year. To have these permits, they're moratorium permits. Each one of that's like a gold medallion taxi cab in New York. The fact that they have a exclusive opportunity to do business with a vessel with this permit. Do we have a use it or lose it provision? Because I think that's what Mr. Smith was getting to, is like, this is getting wearisome for our staff and enforcement, and why are they waiting so long? Is there a provision that if you're, where you can lose if you have 20 boats and you don't get signed up, that if you meet a certain deadline, those permits are null and void unless a moratorium's lifted at some point. So is that in our ordinance, or is that something that the council may need to consider to put a little bit more teeth or a little bit more of a risk assessment for the people that are kind of stalling? I don't know how much of it might be difficulties getting the information in, or how much of it is just trying to make life miserable for our staff. So what's your answer to that?
We've communicated that to them. I know I've personally spoken with a couple of the attorneys and said, because the question has come up, you know, when a livery vessel goes out of business, can they transfer their medallions, we'll call them, for example? And the answer that we've given is, you know, while you're in business and while you're registered and active in the city, you can transfer, you can sell, you can lease, and so on. However, we've told them that if you stop operating and if you cease to exist in the city, you can no longer transfer any of that because you have expired under the moratorium and you can not come back until the moratorium's lifted. So I would say we agree with that. It's not spelled out that way, but certainly how it
Yeah,
operates.
because, you know, you're talking about a 24-hour timeline and 4 letters and, you know, that kind of stuff. At what point do we say, time's up? You didn't get it in? You no longer have a BRT to do business in the city of Destin under our present moratorium. There is no provision for that right now? There is no timeline?
There's not a timeline in there, but that's the point of the moratorium. If they stop operating and they can't come back, so they can't go through a season without
You know where
operating.
I'm getting at?
I know you're getting at. I mean, theoretically, if we're going to put teeth into it, and if they're in violation, and you know they can't do it anymore. If we go through the legal process of you have 24 hours to do it, and then within 24 hours they didn't apply, and then after they don't apply, I guess it goes to the magistrate because now they've failed to meet their notice of violation, and then during that entire time, I guess they could illegally operate every single day, but ultimately they would be illegally operating if they didn't come into compliance.
And that's probably another thing that we have to do is speed up the hearing dates. We can't wait a month or more. We need to probably give them whatever that time frame is and then set the hearing within 2 weeks. And probably.
Good discussion for that meeting on the 7th, that you're going to put this on the agenda. All right. Is that all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I've got 2 things real quick. One is just driving around town, riding my bike, having a discussion with our land use attorney and our code enforcement guys. I want to, we need to have a discussion, we may even talk a little bit about it during the visioning, is maybe update our abatement ordinance to where we've got some troubled properties in this community that are ridiculous. And it doesn't do any good to send them violations and even put a lien on their property because their property still looks like a piece of crap. So I'd like to have that discussion to where, hey, if they're not going to do it, we're going to go in there and we're going to clean it up. We'll charge them for it, put a lien on their house. So if they sell it, they don't get, you know, they can't sell it until they pay us back for whatever the city costs to cleaning the property up. It's for the betterment of the community as a whole, for the neighbors that are looking at it from across the street or next door. And we have more of them than I ever thought. And I think Kim's gone round and round along with the code enforcement folks, and I think that we probably need to revisit it. We're writing our whole new, you know, we're rewriting the code of ordinances anyways, our land development codes. This is going to be a really good time to have those kind of discussions, to, you know, because part of our responsibility is the health, welfare, and safety of our community. And if you're just curious, and I won't name names or name properties for legal reasons, but just drive around and have that on your radar, and you're going to be surprised. And so that's the discussion I'd like to have. We can talk about it, get that on the agenda in some form, maybe not the 7th or the 3rd one. Maybe we do that in March. I'd like to maybe have a little bit of discussion on that when we're talking about our visioning of what we want Destin to look like. Maybe that's one of the things that we briefly touch on. Lastly, and I think during the visioning, the sheriff department's going to come and attend and make a few comments. I got some public safety concerns about an uptick in crime. It's not just happening in Chicago and New York and big bustling metropolitan areas. We're not impervious to some of the stuff that's going on in society today, and I think we need to have that conversation. I think during the visioning session, during public comment, I think the sheriff's going to come and give us some ideas, give us a little bit of update, and we can do a formal discussion about it here on the dais with a presentation from the sheriff's office at some point after our visioning session. And I think I've heard different council members speak about concerns about uptick in crime and stuff like that. What motivated me to even mention this tonight was I got an email from a person that was wanting to think about moving to Destin. He didn't go into great detail, but he said he could work from home, and so he can live anywhere, and he'd like to live here. And the only question he had, not schools and not how much homes cost, he goes, "What's your crime rate?" And I didn't know what it was. And when I started to look at it, it was rather eye-opening of what's happened over the last 36 months. And so I reached out to the sheriff, had a little discussion with him, and invited him to come to our visioning session so we could start having that discussion as well. And it all ties into a lot of things that will eventually be our LDC. I think there was some recommendations, even from our harbor advisory panel, some issues like what is, we in our city charter, it says the harbor district's going to be a festive a marketplace. And somebody says, well, has anybody ever given a definition of what a festive marketplace is or should be? That's another thing I think we can talk about during our visioning. So I think it's going to be a good subject matter. I'm really excited about our visioning because I think our visioning session outside of our wish list is going to move forward into some other discussions on how we can better enhance our community as a whole. So I'm looking forward to that. That's all I got for tonight. So up next, Kyle. No, Kim, sorry.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Kyle.
Me neither.
All right, last chance, public comment. Anyone like to step up to the plate? Come on up, sir. If you would, sir, state your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes. But seeing how there's so many people here, I might give you a little longer.
Claude Perry, I live at 732 Harbor Boulevard in Destin. And I was delighted to hear from Mark, his report. However, I'm still confused about I understand the need for equipment, knowing where all the equipment's going to be located. I understand the need for an engineering study and a survey, but he seems to indicate that it has to be a deposit, and I think that's something the city has to provide. And from a timeline, he even mentioned a spec package, but I don't think anybody's going to get anything done until you get a spec package. So I guess I'm trying to understand when is this deposit supposed to be made and who's supposed to make it so that this project can get underway. I'm like everybody else. I'm anxious to see it get going. So seems to me the deposit seems to be the hang-up, and maybe y'all already know the answer to when that's going to be made, who makes it.
As far as I know, Claude, we haven't got to that point. Nobody's asked us for any money yet. I think this was an update, just a generalization update where we're at, because I don't think any one of us asked the question of when you want your deposit. So we'll get that answer. We'll have that answer when that request is made, because it's got to come before the city council at a city council meeting to have that discussion. And there'll be discussion on how much it is, what it's going to entail, and stuff like that. So he was a little bit amiss of not clarifying that aspect of it. I probably should ask that question. What the time? We never did get a timeline on when the project started.
I raised my hand, tried to ask the question,
Yeah.
but
I missed you. I
missed me.
apologize. But the thing I would say is that we'll have a timeline probably soon. As you can tell by his presentation, they are very active in working. And Shep was here. He's gone now. But some of that was still, we hadn't signed it. We hadn't signed the franchise agreement and the underground contract. That's
a lot of moving parts.
Lots of moving parts. But we'll get those answered from you, because now you got me curious.
Are you chipping in on the deposit or something, or what do you, I mean, I was just kidding.
All right, what did you say?
He's going to ask you if you're going to chip in with the deposit.
Sure.
Every business owner will be chipping in because once they underground it, they have to pay for their own hookup. So it ain't going to be, it's not going to be cheap, but it'll be really good come hurricane time. All righty then. So anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn.